Hi, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a Book of Mormon Tidbits video, and we're going to be talking about Pahoran, and I'm really excited to talk about this with you. It's a very exciting, just wonderful story in the Book of Mormon that I really like a lot. So if you're new to my channel, I created this channel as a homeschooling resource to do different curriculum ideas, organizational ideas, and ways to invite Christ into your homeschool space. So if you're interested in those things, please hit that subscribe button, and let's talk about Pahoran. So first of all, I just kind of want to give a little background about who he is, so we kind of know what's going on. And we're going to be talking about him a little bit, and come follow me in a few weeks. We're almost there because the story is at the very end of the book of Alma. It's the last few chapters. So we're getting really close to the book of Alma. Can you believe it? It's crazy to me that it's almost August, but we're getting very close. And so Pahoran is Nephi-Ha's son. And Nephi-Ha was the second chief judge over the land when Alma the Younger decided to give up being judge and go out and preach the gospel. So that happens in the very beginning of Alma. And so then Nephi-Ha reigns as the judge, and then Pahoran becomes the judge. So he's kind of the judge, the governor of the land. So that's who we're going to be talking about. And, Captain Moroni is going to make a few appearances as well because he's Captain Moroni. He has to be in the story. So we're going to start the story in Alma 59, just briefly in Alma 59, and then we're going to go in the next few chapters from there. So I have my notes, I have my scriptures, so we're ready to go. So throughout this whole story, I'm gonna be using a few different quotes from Elder Bednar. He has a couple talks about Pahoran. It was actually quite surprising. In a very short span of years, he has those. So if you're interested in looking at the original talks, you can check out my blog post below because they'll be linked in that. And then just a few other background things about this story. During this time, the Nephites and Lamanites have been at war for a long time. Okay, we've had Captain Moroni raising the title of liberty, trying to remind the people of all the good things and who they're fighting for, what they're fighting for. And then we also have had Helaman and the Stripling warriors fighting this war, and the war is still not done. It's still not over. I know, you wish it was. I'm sure they wished it was. It had been a long time just going and going with war. And so this is what we're coming into, is this war-torn world, and just the people are tired, they're exhausted, they're hungry. So just get that mental image in your head and imagine what it would look like if it was you in that situation of just being so sick of being in a war. So in Alma 59, we learn about this first epistle that Moroni is going to send to Pahoran. And so it's in verse 3, he's sending this epistle to tell him that the army of Helaman need some help. They need some reinforcement. And so please send them. So that's what we read in Alma 59:3. And then we flip to Alma 60. And he sends another epistle because he hasn't heard back from Pahoran. And this chapter is gonna get pretty harsh, guys. This is a pretty intense chapter from Captain Moroni. So in here, I'm just gonna kind of go through some of these verses and just show you how frustrated and tired and exhausted Moroni is. And I just don't even know what I would do in this situation. I probably would have felt the same way as Moroni. So I just want you to really feel for these people in this story because it makes it so much more meaningful to all of us. So in verse 1, it says, he wrote again to the governor. He hasn't heard a response, so he writes him again. And in verse 2, I have somewhat to say unto them by the way of condemnation, right? So he's calling him out. He's like, listen, we have an issue right here. Sorry, I'm in this rolly chair. I just keep moving around. It's kind of fun, but also distracting. So sorry about that. And then he goes on in verse 3. He says, I say unto you that myself and also my men and also Helaman and his men have suffered exceedingly great sufferings, yea, even hunger, thirst, and fatigue, and all manner of afflictions of every kind. So we're suffering. We're really struggling here. And then in verse 6, he says, we did not desire to know the cause of your exceedingly great neglect. And I just feel like that's pretty harsh thing to say to somebody. And the cause of your thoughtless state. This is a very harsh chapter, guys. It's very very rude, but it's also important to remember where Moroni is at this point, right? He's fighting for his people. He is fighting for his armies, and he is so tired and exhausted and frustrated. Okay, so that's important to keep in mind at this point. And again, he mentions, because of your extremely great neglect towards them, like, we've lost our armies, and tells them, if you guys had come, if you had listened to my first letter and sent people, maybe not all these people would have died if you had just listened. And he says the slothfulness of our government, extremely great neglect, it's repeated over and over and over again. He said, let's start again. For were it not for the wickedness which first commenced at our head, we could have withstood our enemies, that they could have gained no power over us. So again, if you had just come, we would have been okay. And he says, for we know not but what ye yourselves are seeking for authority. We know not but what ye are also traitors to your country. So, he's like, who knows? Maybe you guys are horrible people. Maybe you're the ones causing all these problems. You're traitors to the cause. We don't know. You can't just like text or call someone or send an email or anything like that. Even sending these epistles, who knows how long even a quick response actually took. And so turning the page in verse 19, it says, ye neglected us because ye are in the heart of your country and you're surrounded by security. So again, assuming that he knows Pahoran's situation, Captain Moroni is so frustrated that he's assuming that, okay, guess what? You are in Zarahemla, you're feeling comfort, and so you just don't even know what's going on out here. You don't even care, so you just then forget you guys. Who cares? So that's, he's assuming that he knows someone else's situation and accuses them of sitting in idleness. And he goes on and says several times that he's like, if you don't send people to help us, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come fight you. I'm going to come retake what should be ours. And I think he says it at least 3 times right towards the end of the chapter, that is, watch out. And then in verse 35, I come unto you speedily. So it's like, you better be good, or you better send somebody, or send us help, send us food, because otherwise I'm coming for you. So again, these are very, very intense, heated words from someone in a very, very struggling emotional state. So I just wanted to read some of my notes here, because as I was writing through this, again, sometimes my thought process on typing it up just sounds better than me just saying it right here. So we're going to learn about Pahoran's response in a second. And this is the best part of this story. I love it so much. It's amazing. It's amazing, guys. You should be excited for this. So it says, well, Pahoran gets this letter, and I want you to think for a moment what it would be like if you got this letter. So if Moroni sent you this letter, besides swooning because Captain Moroni sent you a letter, what else would be going through your mind when you got this letter? You could possibly go right to social media and post your emotions. I know that's not true of everyone, but social media itself shows over and over again that when people are frustrated with someone or something, they want to vent it to the world and receive feedback that validates their feelings. So issues and things that we struggle with shouldn't be aired on social media, at least not initially, not right from the get-go. But I love, Pahoran is going to teach us another way, a better way to respond to these struggles, to being frustrated, to these heated responses. And we don't have the details of everything that is going on with Pahoran when he receives this letter. We don't know how long it actually took. It says that he gave a quick response in, I think it's Alma 61 verse 1. But, this is very, very snail mail. So I don't know what that means. If they have to, they have to find Pahoran, then they have to go find Moroni, and who knows how long that takes. But he could have initially been very, very angry and frustrated as well, but I imagine that he kind of thinks through what's going on. He considers where Moroni is before he responds to him. So let me see where we are in my notes. And so as I think about Pahoran, I feel like he thought about his response before he just wrote it down on paper, and he might have written several letters in a row before he finally got his frustrations out and came to understand where Moroni was coming from. So it might not have just been one letter and sent it off. You know, he might have written several things and vented his emotions through this writing process. So I'm not sure, but his response seems very well thought out. It doesn't seem like something he would have done in the very height of emotion. So it's this carefully constructed letter to a dear friend. So let's go over a few things that Pahoran says, because some of them, they're just amazing. They're amazing, guys. I know I'm so excited about this, but you should be excited too. This is such a good story, and it's right at the end of Alma, you know, when you're like, oh my gosh, could there be any more chapters in Alma? And I think sometimes it's forgotten, but it's so good, and so we need to remember this. So again, his response was quick, and as I thought about him giving a quick response, he wanted to send reassurance back to Moroni as soon as possible, because he knew Moroni was frustrated and that he was having a hard time, and I'm sure he didn't want Moroni to come find him and track him down either. But he tries to give reassurance as quickly as possible. And then in verse 2 he says, "Behold, I say unto you, Moroni, that I do not join your great afflictions, yea, it grieves my soul." So his first thing that he says to him is that, I feel for you. I can't even believe what you're going through, and it makes me so sad. And then he goes on to say, there's been a rebellion here. People have risen up in rebellion, and people have been led away by the flattering words of these other people, and there's a lot of issues going on here. And he says in verse 5, they've driven me out before them, and I fled to the land of Gideon. So he's not even in Zarahemla. You know, he's been driven out of his land as well, but Moroni doesn't know that. But guess what? Moroni just accused him of living in comfort and not realizing what was going on in the world around him. And he's not. You know, he could have gotten so mad about that. Like, guess what, Moroni? You just don't even know what's going on in the world. But he doesn't. He doesn't get mad about it. He just tells him, he acknowledges his situation, and then he tells him what's going on in their situation. So let's flip the page. I think we're ready to flip. So I love it. Verse 9. There's two verses in this chapter that really, really stand out to me. So we're going to start with verse 9 because it comes before the other verse. So in verse 9, he says, "And now in your epistle you have censured me." Censured? Yes, we got it. "But it mattereth not. I am not angry, but do rejoice in the greatness of your heart." I love this so much, because he's like, I understand you're angry with me, but I'm not going to respond in anger. And I realize that you were angry because of the greatness of your heart. Like, he understands what Moroni was going through. Maybe not like personally understands, but he is willing to see the struggle instead of see the person just getting there and being super angry at him. And I just love that. I think it just shows such a great aspect of his character. It also just shows that Pahoran realizes that Moroni's intentions were good. You know, he wanted to focus on helping his people. He wasn't getting mad at Pahoran because he wanted more power or he was selfish, but his intentions were good, you know, and that's what Pahoran is acknowledging in verse 9. And his situation sounds very similar. What Moroni and Pahoran are going through sounds very similar to what we're going through right now. And so I just wanted to share a few thoughts about that, because I think like it's been a really rough year and we're all sick of what's going on, I'm sure, and it's not looking like it's gonna stop anytime soon. So we don't want to keep pushing forward, and we want to do what is best for our families. So some of us have even written angry letters or posts, but I feel like the story of Pahoran and Moroni shows that it is easy to misunderstand a situation when emotions are high. You know, Pahoran didn't know what was going on with Moroni. Moroni didn't know what was going on with Pahoran, and their responses are so very different. You know, Moroni has totally misunderstood what's going on with Pahoran, and it's really easy to do that when we're exhausted, when we're tired, when our emotions have just been high for months, right? Basically this whole year, they've just been high, and it's really easy to misunderstand people's intentions and their situations when that's the case. So what do we do? Venting our emotions is not a bad thing. You know, it's good to get those things out, but the way in which we choose to vent them can be a very bad thing. And so all I can say to what do we do, what should we do, is to look to the example of Pahoran, because I feel like it is such a good example of how we should respond. The next verse we're going to talk about, again, this is not all the wonderful things in this chapter. There are so many more things I could talk about, but we're gonna move on, so we're not here all day. And the next verse that I just want to focus on for a few seconds is verse 19. And this is just so beautiful. Again, I'm excited to meet Pahoran one day. I don't even know, what type of person he really is. We have so little information about him besides these few chapters, but it speaks volumes about his character. And he says, "And now, Moroni, I do joy in receiving your epistle." What? How can you joy in receiving that epistle? It was so mean. And he said, "For I was somewhat worried concerning what we should do, whether it should be just in us to go against our brethren." So Pahoran looks at this epistle, receiving it from Moroni, as an answer to his prayers. This epistle that was so mean and so heated answered Pahoran's prayers. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know if they should go retake their lands, what they should do with their people, how he was going to do it. And Moroni ends up being that answer to his prayers. I love this verse so much because Pahoran looks at Moroni's rant as an answer to prayer. Pahoran didn't know what he should do to reclaim their lands, and then Moroni decides to vent, and Pahoran finds his answer. Not saying that that's always how you're going to find your answer. Maybe you shouldn't go vent to someone because you just never know. But he tells Moroni to come to Gideon, which is where he is at, and they can work together to reclaim their lands. So answers to prayers come in unexpected ways and through unexpected means. Are we taking this time of struggle and frustration to seek for answers, or are we too busy being offended by everything going on in the world? Even in the most dire of circumstances, Pahoran still found good. He still found hope, and he thought the best of people despite their imperfections. This story is just so beautiful to me. If anybody had reason to be upset and angry, it was him. And he chose not to. He still saw the good and the beautiful in Moroni and the people around him. And he was in horrible circumstances. And he still was able to push forward with faith and to testify of God and to go and help his people. So lastly, I just want to mention this one last thought that I have. And it comes in the beginning of chapter 62 of Alma, of just kind of Moroni's response. Now, Moroni probably feels foolish. I don't know how you couldn't feel foolish, but you have to move on. At least hopefully you do. And so in verse 1 it said, "And now it came to pass that when Moroni had received this epistle, his heart did take courage and was filled with exceedingly great joy because of the faithfulness of Pahoran, that he was not also a traitor to the freedom and cause of his country." And so realizing he's not a traitor, like he's with me, we're still on the same team. So that's good. So then Moroni goes to him in the land, in Gideon, and they are able to work together to retake some of their lands. And I just want us to think about this question. It says, when we receive a change in perspective, like Moroni did, do our actions change? So Moroni chose to move forward even in this difficult, misunderstood situation he had with Pahoran. What do we choose to do? When we're in these kind of awkward situations with people, do we choose to move forward? Do we choose to let those things define us and decide, no, this is too awkward, or I'm too embarrassed to move forward? So just something to think about, just the importance of making sure we keep moving forward. Even if something embarrassing happens, if a misunderstanding happens, that we keep working together and we keep pushing forward. And just to close, I'm going to use one of Elder Bednar's quotes. He says, "One of the greatest indicators of our own spiritual maturity is revealed in how we respond to the weakness, the inexperience, and the potentially offensive actions of others. A thing, an event, or an expression may be offensive, but you and I can choose not to be offended, and to say with Pahoran, it mattereth not." And I just love that so much. Like, so much of our spiritual maturity, who we are as a person, how close we're becoming to Christ, is defined by how we respond in these very difficult situations. And I know it's difficult. I know we're frustrated. But I just hope on your most frustrating days, if you need something to turn to, someone to help you and to vent to, you can look to Pahoran because he understands, and you can turn to that example in the scriptures and you can feel peace and comfort, because I know that I have. And again, I just love this story so much. I hope you'll read through it again. you know, hopefully in a few weeks with Come Follow Me, but even sooner than that, because you can just learn so much from it. And I'm excited to see what next month brings with Book of Mormon Tidbits. And so please give me a thumbs up if you enjoy seeing these videos, and we will see you next time.